In the final episodes of Season 5, which hit Amazon Prime within the last 48 hours, Jeremy Clarkson revealed something that will permanently change the way viewers watch this show. He has been diagnosed with prostate cancer. The scene unfolds quietly, almost without warning. Jeremy is sitting in what appears to be his farm office. Familiar setting, ordinary lighting, the kind of shot that usually precedes an argument about crop rotation or machinery costs. He's talking with farm manager Kaleb Cooper and land agent Charlie Ireland about the harvest, which is behind schedule, which it almost always is. And then, somewhere in the middle of it, he just says it. I've got cancer.
I've got cancer.
Kaleb's reaction is the one that will stay with you. He visibly recoils. No. He even snorts, not out of disrespect, but out of pure disbelief, the kind of involuntary noise a body makes when the brain isn't ready for what the ears just heard. Then Clarkson confirms it, and everything in the room seems to get slightly heavier. Kaleb asks where, and this is classic Clarkson. He shuts it down immediately. Where it is no concern of anybody. I've known since May. He later opens up more than that initial brush-off suggested he would. He explains that he had slipped away from filming to see a doctor, had a biopsy done, and the results came back positive. The cancer, as he described it, was aggressive. But, and this is the word he kept returning to, it was caught early. 10% of his prostate was affected. He told Kaleb that directly, in terms plain enough that you didn't need a medical background to understand the weight of them. I disappeared off the other week and I had a biopsy, and it is cancer, and it's aggressive, but it's really early. Surgery was already on the calendar. He told the team he had been hoping against hope that the harvest could be finished first, that he could get through the agricultural commitments before going under the knife. But it wasn't going to fall that way. The operation was going to land right in the middle of everything, as these things tend to do. And in typical Clarkson fashion, he wrapped up a deeply frightening personal disclosure with a sardonic footnote. So we started the year with me having coronary heart disease and ended it with cancer. Because this wasn't even the first health scare this season. Season 5 opened with Clarkson in a hospital bed recovering from a procedure to unblock his coronary arteries. It's almost too much to pack into a single run of television, and yet here it is. Before the final 2 episodes dropped, Clarkson put out a warning on Instagram. He called them a difficult watch. He used the word sombre. He said the content inside was really difficult. That warning was not a piece of promotional dramatics. It was accurate. Those of you who've already seen it will know. The season closes on him back in a hospital room, which he points out himself, with the weary recognition of a man who has become too familiar with that particular ceiling. We started Season 5 with me in a hospital bed, and here we are at the end, and I'm back in a hospital bed. He tells viewers directly that elements of the treatment had run into complications. Some of the treatment has gone awry. I'm going to be here for a little while. I'm nil by mouth. I don't know what's going to happen. The line after that is the one that's been screenshotted, clipped, quoted, and shared across every platform covering this story. What I wanted to say was, if this is all successful, I'll see you for Season 6. And if it isn't, I won't. Then, take care everyone. 5 words. No fanfare. The camera cut. Now, here is where this video takes a turn from pure documentation into something more hopeful. And this is important context that wasn't visible when those finale scenes were filmed. Jeremy Clarkson is in remission. Just days after the Season 5 finale aired, Clarkson posted a video to Instagram and spoke with the Sunday Times, and the tone was completely different to what viewers had just watched on screen. Now, the more observant among you will have noticed that I'm not dead, he said, with the particular deadpan delivery you'd expect from him. And I'm not just not dead, I'm perfectly fine. My eyebrows, in particular, are looking very lustrous. He confirmed that a follow-up PSA blood test, taken 2 months prior, showed no detectable cancer. He described himself, without any apparent irony, as, without a doubt, officially, the world's luckiest man. He told the Times that the diagnosis had landed harder emotionally than he expected, not for himself necessarily, but because of how people responded to it. The reaction landed harder than I thought it would, he said. He was also clear-eyed about what comes next. He acknowledged, without softening it, that 40% of men who experience prostate cancer will face a recurrence. I try to be positive, he said. I've decided to be one of the 60% who doesn't have a recurrence. Very Clarkson, very on brand, and, for what it's worth, the right attitude. He also confirmed what a lot of people were quietly hoping. Season 6 is already in production. Amazon released a separate video shortly after, in which he gave that news, while acknowledging it had been, quote, a bit of a year. That is perhaps the greatest understatement in the history of this particular television program. The treatment itself warrants a bit more detail, because understanding what Clarkson went through helps explain why he spent time in that hospital bed looking as uncertain as he did. Doctors removed the cancerous portion of his prostate, roughly 10% of the gland, through surgery. The operation itself, as Clarkson described it, was relatively quick. It's the recovery that takes time and creates complications. In his case, those complications included the use of a catheter and, separately, a situation where he was taking blood-thinning medication for his heart condition at a time when he shouldn't have been, given the prostate surgery. That's the kind of compound problem that happens when someone is managing multiple serious health conditions simultaneously, and it's exactly the sort of thing that lands a person back in a hospital room looking uncertain about what happens next. But the PSA test doesn't lie. 2 months ago, no detectable cancer. That is the outcome everyone was hoping for. The cancer that got Clarkson is a specific type, aggressive in classification, which in clinical terms refers to disease that carries features suggesting a higher likelihood of progression or spread if left untreated. It does not mean untreatable. It does not mean terminal. What it means, in Clarkson's own words, is that if he hadn't gone and got himself checked when he did, the story might have been very different. It could have spread. It could have gone into the pancreas. It could have gone anywhere, and that would have been trouble. The PSA test, prostate-specific antigen, is a blood test. It's not complicated, it's not particularly invasive, it involves a needle in the arm, the same as any blood draw, and in Clarkson's case, combined with the biopsy that followed an elevated PSA reading, it identified a cancer that was aggressive enough to do serious damage, at a stage early enough to treat it successfully. That sequence, test, flag, biopsy, surgery, recovery, remission, is the sequence that saves lives, and it only starts if someone actually goes and gets the test. There is currently no national screening program for prostate cancer in the UK, unlike for breast, cervical, or bowel cancer. The UK National Screening Committee reviewed the evidence again in 2025 and 2026 and did not recommend universal population-based screening, citing concerns about over-treatment and false positives. Roughly 72 to 80% of men with elevated PSA levels don't actually have prostate cancer, which can lead to unnecessary anxiety and procedures. However, in May 2026, the committee did recommend targeted PSA-based screening every 2 years for men aged 45 to 61 with a specific BRCA2 genetic variant and relevant family history. It's a limited step, but a step. What this means in practice for most men is this: you can request a PSA test. Your GP cannot turn you away simply because you don't have symptoms, and if you're over 50 or over 45 if you're black, because the risk for black men is 1 in 4 rather than the general 1 in 8, you are entitled to have that conversation and request that test. Clarkson has been direct about this in a way that doesn't leave much room for ambiguity. I know a lot of you will say, I don't want to be tested because it means someone will have to put their finger in me, but it's just a blood test these days. He went further. If your doctor says he's not going to test you because you don't have symptoms and you're not high risk, just lie. Say you have to get up 32 times in the night for a wee and there's some dribbling, because 12,000 men die every year in the UK from prostate cancer. Don't be one of them. Get tested. That is not the kind of message you can ignore. Prostate cancer is now the most commonly diagnosed cancer in the UK, surpassing breast cancer. More than 64,000 men were diagnosed in 2022 alone, a figure that has continued to climb. 1 in 8 men in Britain will be diagnosed with it at some point in their lifetime. It typically grows slowly and often produces no symptoms until it's already progressed beyond the point where treatment is straightforward, which is exactly why the PSA test matters, and why people putting off a checkup matters more than they probably realize. For the record, 11,000 men die from prostate cancer every year in England. That's the figure Prostate Cancer UK has been using in its awareness campaigns. It's also the reason their fundraising challenge asks participants to walk 11,000 steps a day throughout March, 1 step per man lost annually. When you see it framed that way, it lands differently. This isn't the first time this disease has appeared on this show. And that fact, when you sit with it, is one of the most extraordinary things about Clarkson's farm. In Season 3, the show introduced viewers to the news that Gerald Cooper, the beloved farmhand with the impenetrable West Country accent and more accumulated agricultural knowledge than you'd find in most textbooks, had been diagnosed with prostate cancer. Clarkson received the news by phone while the cameras were still rolling. He turned to the crew and said, simply, "Gerald's got cancer. Oh, shoo it. B.O." Gerald went through 37 sessions of radiotherapy. The show followed that journey. And then, later in the same season, there he was, back on the farm, dry stone walling, as if no time had passed. Clarkson spotted him first. "Gerald, you're back. You're back." He couldn't keep the relief off his face. In June 2024, the Diddly Squat social accounts posted a photo of Gerald in a woolly sheep pattern jumper, beaming. The caption read, "A healthy and happy Gerald. He was cancer-free." The whole country seemed to let out a breath. 2 men, same farm, same disease, caught early in both cases. Both now in remission. If you are going to watch a television show for 5 years, you could do worse than to end up with this particular lesson, reinforced across 2 separate storylines. Clarkson himself had been talking about prostate cancer publicly for years before his own diagnosis. He'd written about getting himself checked in a Times column, where he described how he'd had too many friends fall seriously ill with the disease. "I've had too many friends go down with prostate cancer, and all it takes to get on top of the situation early is a moment or 2 of being a bit cross-eyed. You get the all clear, and the doc goes home happy. What's not to like?" He wrote that before he knew he had it himself. Now those words carry an entirely different kind of weight. The actual real-world effect of this kind of television is not abstract. It is documentable. There's a man named Andrew Hood from North Devon who has spoken about getting himself tested for testicular cancer, specifically because of something he saw Clarkson cover on the Grand Tour. He went and got checked. He credits that decision, prompted by a television presenter talking frankly about something most men would rather not think about, with giving him the chance to deal with his own health in time. He later ran a 34-mile ultramarathon that ended at Diddly Squat as a way of saying thank you. That's not a metaphor. That happened. The same dynamic is almost certainly playing out right now, multiplied across however many millions of people watched the Season 5 finale and heard Jeremy Clarkson say those words from a hospital bed. For every person who saw that and thought, "Actually, I've been putting off seeing my GP," if even one of them goes and gets tested and catches something early, that is a life that wouldn't have been saved without this show. The Thayfor 5. "If I hadn't got myself checked out and they hadn't caught the problem early," Clarkson said on the program, "this could well have been my last harvest. It's only because they did catch it early that there's every hope I'll be harvesting this farm for many, many years to come." That's not a tagline. That's what happened to him personally. There's also a business dimension to this story that's worth being precise about, because in the immediate aftermath of these episodes dropping, a lot of people have been asking the same question: what does this mean for the farm? For the show? For everything that's been built up around Diddly Squat over the past 5 years? The honest answer is more nuanced than a single yes or no. The Diddly Squat operation is not a single entity that rises and falls together. Hawkstone Brewery, for instance, is a completely separate legal business, built on separate land in the Cotswolds, co-owned by Clarkson and entrepreneur Johnny Hornby, with its own planning permissions, its own production infrastructure, and distribution now reaching more than 500 pubs across the UK. The brewery posted sales of £7.8 million in the year to March 2025, and international expansion plans are already in motion, with Heineken having taken a minority stake to help with logistics and reach. Hawkstone's name comes from a Neolithic standing stone near the farm, and while the show gave it enormous initial momentum, it has grown to a point where it doesn't need the show to survive. It is its own thing now. The Farmer's Dog Pub operates similarly, independently, on its own footing, with its own revenue stream distinct from whatever happens with the television series. What does depend heavily on Clarkson personally, and on his continued involvement, is the agricultural side, the actual daily running of the farm, the harvest, and the television show itself. And here is where Kaleb Cooper becomes important, in a way that goes beyond his role as the entertaining and frequently exasperated straight man to Clarkson's enthusiastic incompetence. Kaleb Cooper Productions, the company through which he takes his earnings from the series, reported assets approaching £1 million in its most recent Companies House filings, £960,000 before liabilities, including £400,000 in cash. He runs it alongside two other businesses, K. Cooper Contracting and K. Cooper Holdings. He set all of this up in 2021, which means he's been building independently for the entirety of this show's run. Amazon has also commissioned content built around Kaleb specifically. He is not simply a supporting character, he is, increasingly, an operation in his own right. When Clarkson first told Kaleb about the diagnosis and surgery, Kaleb's response was straightforward. If you need anything, just ring. That was the same man who has spent 5 years learning everything there is to learn about running this particular farm. If anyone is positioned to carry the operational weight of Diddly Squat through a difficult period, it's the people already standing in that room during that conversation. There is one thing that Clarkson himself said clearly this season, in a separate moment about British farming economics more broadly: the farm depends on the television income to survive. The land needs the show, which means the most important thing for Diddly Squat, commercially, isn't the brewery or the pub, it's Jeremy Clarkson getting well enough to film Season 6. And as we now know, that process is already underway. Season 6 has been confirmed by Amazon. Production has already started. The show goes on, and the man at the center of it all, who sat in a hospital bed a few months ago and said he didn't know what was going to happen, is now telling people his eyebrows are looking particularly lustrous and urging strangers to lie to their doctors about their urinary habits, if that's what it takes to get a PSA test. That is Jeremy Clarkson, in remission, filming Season 6, exactly where everyone hoped he'd be. We don't usually close a video quite like this, but this one requires it. If you're a man over 50 or over 45 and black, because the risk profile is meaningfully different, and that deserves to be said plainly, or if you have a family history of prostate cancer, or if you've simply been letting a routine checkup slide because life keeps getting in the way, Gerald Cooper's story and Jeremy Clarkson's story are both, in their separate ways, pointing you toward the same thing. Prostate Cancer UK has a 30-second online risk checker. That's it, 30 seconds. It asks you a few questions and tells you whether it's worth requesting a PSA test from your GP. Men aged 50 and over have a right to request one. If your GP pushes back, push back. You're entitled to it, and the test itself is a needle in your arm, nothing more invasive than that. 12,000 men die from prostate cancer in the UK every year. The vast majority of cases, when detected early, are treatable. The gap between those two facts, detected early, treated successfully, is smaller than most people think. It's often a blood test wide. We'll be watching for further updates on Jeremy's recovery as Season 6 comes together, the same as every other person who has followed this farm since 2019. In the meantime, our thoughts are with him, with Lisa Hogan, with Kaleb, and with everyone at Diddly Squat who had to carry on through what was, by any measure, an extraordinarily difficult year. If this video reminded you to book a check you've been postponing,